Right, how to service an Extralite Cyber Rear SP. This also applies to the Extralite Cyber Rear SL as well. They're basically identical in terms of internals. The only difference is the micro adjuster on the SP is partially covered by the non-drive side flange. The micro adjuster on the SL is totally open and very easy to get to. Everything else is the same. So, as you can see, this hub looks pretty disgusting and dirty. I've just got back from 150k in post-typhoon mountain riding hell, riding through some pretty grim stuff. So I'm looking forward to opening this hub up and finding all sorts of nastiness inside. So, where to start then? Servicing an Extralite hub is pretty simple. All you do is you take off this end cap, then you undo this micro adjuster all the way, take it off. That allows you to knock the axle through, which takes off the free body mechanism as well at the same time, including the pawls. Then you just clean out the ratchet in the hub shell, clean the free body inside, clean all the pawls, clean the pawl seats, check everything for damage and excessive wear, and also check the bearings. Also check the drive side end cap tightness, because this is a source of creaking with the Extralite Cyber Rear hubs. So to do this job, you need a 20mm spanner and a 5mm Allen key to open up the hub. To clean it, well, it's up to you really, but I use wet tissues, alcohol impregnated wet wipes, to get the lion's share of the grit and the dirt and everything off. That's the sort of first pass of cleaning. After that, I go at it again with a degreaser, clean it all up. Lubing it, you need to use the Extralite alu grease, which you can buy directly from Extralite. The reason they ask you to do this, and they insist on it, is because this is a grease which is very, very light and won't cause any problems with the free mechanism, and also, probably more importantly, won't degrade the O-rings, which are used as the spring system for the pawls and also the drive ring seal. So step one then, taking off the end cap, very easy, just pull it off with your hand. There you go. So you can see lots of dirt in there already. Step two, you need a 20mm spanner and a 5mm Allen key. Or, if you have one, a 20mm socket which you can slide over the end and fit to this micro adjuster. Now, if you use the socket, be very careful not to jam it on too hard and scratch all this flange up. Now, undoing the micro adjuster, you have to kind of work against what you logically think of undoing to be. What you do, first of all, is you get the spanner in place, then you put on the Allen key, but you don't turn the spanner because that can scratch up all the flange. You turn the axle itself, but you turn it as if you're doing it up. So like this, which effectively undoes the micro adjuster. So I'm going to do that all the way now. Take the micro adjuster off and show you the next stage. Right, the micro adjuster's out. There it is. So put this somewhere safe, don't lose it, otherwise you never ride in that hub again, or until you order a new one from Extralite. So let's have a look at it then. This is the axle. There's the bearing, the 6803 bearing. What we're going to do now is we're going to push this through from this side, which will take out the whole free body mechanism. Now, when you do this, as you do with any hub, you've got to be very careful because the pawls will release themselves and you don't want them flying off. So, do this in an area where if they do fly off, you can find them again, i.e. not on a beach. So to do this, we simply push the axle from this side. There you go. There's the axle free body pull mechanism, looking pretty disgusting. So the next step is to take all this apart. This is very easy. All you do is you tap the axle through this way and it will come out all the way. There we go. Don't lose this, obviously. Now you can see my hands getting more dirty. Here you can see the pawl, the other pawl, the O-ring, which is the spring to the pawls, and the O-ring which acts as the seal to the drive ring. There's the bearing, the 6803 bearing. There's another 6803 bearing there. That feels a bit not so smooth, so we could have a look at maybe replacing that. What we're going to do is basically just take off this O-ring, clean it all up, take this O-ring off here, and get everything looking nice and shiny, get all the dirt off it. Then we're going to clean inside here, the non-drive side, and down inside here as well. Give the whole hub a good clean as well, and the spokes and everything. Then we're going to clean the ratchet system, which is again looking pretty disgusting. Clean the flange. That bearing feels okay. Clean all in here, get everything wiped down, degrease it then. With these Extralite hubs, they have a sort of a channel here where the ratchet screws in. Now this gets full of dirt, so we need to get all that out as well. Okay, so the first step is just go at it with alcohol impregnated tissues, wet wipes. Get all that clean, and then use a degreaser. Now the axle here, this is the main axle body. This is the screw-on end cap. Now, as I said at the start of the video, it's best to check how tight this is, because this sometimes can come loose. The way to do this is to put a 5mm Allen key in this side, another 5mm Allen key in this side, and check how tight it is. If it's loose at all, give it a nip down, okay? It shouldn't be loose at all. The other thing you can do if you want to do a really deep clean is to actually take this off. So again, use 2 Allen keys, one in each end, and open it up, take this off, clean it all up, re-grease inside it, and then screw it back down and tighten it again. And that'll be a full service of the axle. You will notice, depending on how old the hub is, you might get some sort of wear marks where the bearings sit, okay? Don't worry too much about that, and certainly don't file them down, because that'll make the axle diameter too small. Now these tolerances are very, very close. If you're noticing any real bad wear and tear, you can actually buy a new axle from Extralite. It's not super expensive, and due to the material and due to the fact that it does wear down eventually, you know, after a few years of hard use, you are going to have to buy a new axle. Okay, so I'm going to clean this, clean the axle, check the tightness, and then we'll do a detailed clean of this. All right, so there you go. That is looking a lot nicer. Look how shiny that is. So that was using, first of all, these alcohol impregnated wet tissues, followed by the spray-on degreaser I showed you in the tune servicing video. Here's the axle, looking pretty nice. You will see on the axle little sort of nicks and abrasions where the bearings sit. Now this is 7075 aluminium. The bearing race will be steel, so the steel is harder than the aluminium, therefore the aluminium gets damaged before the race. Where the bearings sit on the axle is here, 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 and here. Here is 6803, so it's narrow. 6803, 6903, so it's wider. You can see the wear point is wider. And again, 6803, so that's narrow. I took a bit of care to wipe all of the grime out of the thread that the micro adjuster sits on, so it all goes back on smooth. And that removes any chance of dirt in there causing it to come loose over time. The hub then, I've cleaned all around in here, got that all clean, cleaned each of these individual grooves out, which took forever, but whatever. Checked the smoothness of the bearing, that's good. Also, another thing you can do when you've got the hub open in front of you is to check for any cracks where the spokes go through. Now, as depressing as it sounds, that does happen, and if you've cracked your hub shell, you need to get a new hub shell. Don't ride it if it's cracked. Check all these spoke positions here, check all the non-drive side ones as well. Also, just check everywhere else on the hub shell for any cracks or any weird stuff that you see. because it's better to check it when you're not riding the bike than it break when you're riding it and then you end up in an ambulance. Also check the spokes. Check the spokes for any discoloration, any bending, if they've been twisted, anything that looks weird, anything that's not straight, you need to replace the spoke. And that's for another video. This is the free body unit then. So I've put my white glove on because this is pretty dirty. Let's have a look at it. Here is the pull. There's another pull. There's the O-ring, which is effectively just a rubber band, which acts as the spring. There's another O-ring on the drive ring, which stops all the gunk getting into the mechanism, although it doesn't totally work, does it? Bearing there, and a bearing there. Now, what we do is, quite simply, just take off the O-ring and take out the first pull, take out the second pull. Then take the O-ring off the drive ring, and there's all our parts. We then need to clean this properly using alcohol impregnated tissues, then degreaser, and then we'll be ready to inspect it all and then put it back together. Okay, so there we go. The pulls are clean, the O-rings are clean. Now it should be noted that I didn't use the strong degreaser on the O-rings because this can degrade them and cause them to become non-elastic, which will bugger up your mechanism here. If they do become non-elastic and sort of sagging, you can get new ones from Amazon pretty easily. Just contact Extralite and ask them for the size reference and they'll tell you. Now let's talk about inspection then. The first thing to inspect is the pulls. What you should do is check the rear of the pull here, where it sits into the pull seat in the free body unit. Check it for any splitting, any kind of cracking. There will be sort of compression evidence that has been pushed very hard against another bit of metal, because it has. So don't worry too much about that, but just, if there's anything, any nicks, any gouges or anything like that, order a new set of pulls from Extralite. The face of the pull should be flat, shouldn't have any splits, any cracks, shouldn't have any misshapen wear points, it should be flat. Now obviously these things do wear out over time because friction is involved in there. So, you're going to get some sort of wear and tear on the end, but it should be even, it should be uniform. It shouldn't be, the corner cracked off or anything like that. Okay, so keep an eye out for it. The next thing to look at is the free body unit itself. Now, there's a few things to check. The first one is the points here where the cassette bites into it. Now this, again, like the tune, this is normal for a lightweight aluminium free body unit. Over time, this will compress the metal, effectively work hardening it, so you'll get a little bit pressed in, and then that will slowly stop over time, and it'll just sit there, unless you're somehow putting a vast amount of force through your bike in these gears here, and then it will keep going. But you have to be a bit of a beast to do that. So what do we actually inspect? Well, you need to look at these little divots to check for any areas where they're raising up, because this will cause the cassette to be difficult to get on and off. If they are raising up, get a small flat file and just file them flat again until this surface is uniform. The next thing to check is this area here where the pulls sit. This will get compressed over time, and you'll notice that there's a sort of silver colour on it rather than the sort of grey titanium looking colour. It's not titanium, but the titanium looking colour of the free body. This is normal, but what you should note is that where the O-ring sits here through can sometimes get a little bit dented or twisted. Now you need to file off any sharp edges here, because any sharp edges can obviously just cut straight through that O-ring, causing your pulls to fly around freely inside your mechanism, which you really don't want. So file these off, make sure they're absolutely smooth, take off as little amount of material as possible, but make sure they're smooth. Next then, just check everything for cracks. Then check the bearings for smoothness, any notching, any grittiness in the bearings. If the bearings are excessively gritty and excessively notching and so on, you need to take them out and put some new bearings in. Again, that's another video, but that's what you need to do. It's very simple on these to do this. And that's it. Now the next stage is putting it all back together. Extralite say and insist that the only grease you should use with these hubs is this, the Alu Grease Super 1, which I believe they had made for them, or they've found out works really well. Extralite sell this on their website. You can get a big tube like this if you're doing a lot of servicing on yours and other people's hubs, or you can get a much smaller one for a bit cheaper, which will probably do you if you just have one Extralite hub, or a front and a rear. So the first thing to do is to put some lube where the pulls sit. Get a bit on your finger and just drop it in and wipe off the excess. Spin it around, wipe it in, same again, job done. Okay, that's all you need. The next step, and please do it this way, because if you don't do it this way, it's a pain in the arse. Get the drive ring O-ring on. Next step, get the pulls in position. Now they go this way with the little groove on them. The little groove goes at the top because this is where the O-ring will sit, and it matches the groove here. So you just stick it on like that. Put the other one on. Now the grease will hold that in position, but there's a chance it might fall out, so be careful. The next step is a bit fiddly. It's a small O-ring that you need to put over the pawl system. Now you do it like this. Put it on one of the little grooves, put it over the other groove, hold it in place with your fingers, and then roll it over like that. Push it all the way down, and then slowly release it so that it sits just in position. Do the same with this side. Sorry if you couldn't see that. Okay, then very gently take your hands off and pray it doesn't ping off. Okay, that's the free body mechanism in place. Don't touch the pawls yet, let it just sit there. The next step is to grease this up. Make sure you get grease all over it, all over where the bearings sit, until it's fully greased. Don't worry about getting grease on the threads, you can clean it afterwards. Next, you're going to put the axle through the free body unit from this side. You might need to wriggle it a bit to get it through, but eventually it will go. When you get to this point, you might need to hold it quite tightly here and tap it through. At this point, the axle is nearly all the way through, but it still needs to be pushed in the last little bit. The best way to do this is to grip it like a syringe, like this, and just push. There we go. So there is our fully cleaned, fully degreased, fully reassembled and lubed up axle and free body unit, ready to go back through the hub shell and be tightened in place with the micro adjuster. Before we put the free body and axle unit through, we need to lube up the ratchet. Just as before, we get the Extralite Alu grease and put some in here. Don't go too mad on it, but put enough in there so that it's lubed up, like so. Also, put some grease on the inner race of the bearing on both sides so that pushing the axle through is easier. From here, it's just a case of sliding the axle through, finding the hole at the other side. Here, you will see the pawl is being blocked by the ratchet. Now here, you will see the pawl is outside the ratchet. To get it in, just push it down with something like a pen. Spin it around very gently until you see the next one. Then push that one in as well. Spin it around, check that it's engaging properly on both pawls, which means that the O-ring is still in position. Then give it a final push. That's in place. Next step, spin the wheel round and clean out all of the grease from this thread and this part of the axle here. Then simply put on the micro adjuster and screw it down as far as you can with your fingers. After that, use the 20mm spanner and your Allen key to tighten it further until it just about bites. Put the end cap on, put the wheel in your bike and check the wheel for any play in the bearings by holding the rim and moving the rim left to right laterally, and check for any knocking sound, any knocking feeling. If you do get any knocking sound or knocking feeling, take the wheel out, tighten the micro adjuster very slightly, put it back in, and keep doing this until there's no play. This is how Extralite recommends you do it. I've found that this is pretty good, but you can go slightly tighter than just about stopping the play. And I find that if you go ever so slightly tighter, that stops the micro adjuster coming loose and that creaking sound coming back. Some people put Loctite in this. Now I have tried this, but it was very, very hard to get the micro adjuster off again, so I really wouldn't recommend it. If your drive side end cap is tight enough and your micro adjuster is tight enough, you shouldn't have any problems with creaking. Now, of course, you need to service this thing regularly, probably more than you think you should be doing it. Extralite recommend every 2 to 3 months. I would say once a month. You've seen how easy it is to do and how fast it is. After you've done it a few times, you can just whiz through it. It's really simple. And that's it. Thank you very much.